Globally, 197 were killed in 2017, of which 41 alone is from the Philippines, which stands out to be number one in Asia. And I think number one globally is Brazil. So Philippines comes second globally speaking. These incidences relates to in defense of the land, territories, and resources. So from this panel of speakers, I'll be asking them a number of questions in terms of the challenges and issues that they're facing. And I would like to first begin the question with Jill Carino. She's from the Philippines. Jill, would you let us know a little bit on the situation and what is perpetuating this kind of difficult situation for indigenous human rights defenders?
Okay, good morning to all. Just to give a short background maybe of what's happening among indigenous peoples in the Philippines. Indigenous peoples compose about 15 to 20% of the population and are scattered in different regions of the country. But what is common among all of them is that their ancestral lands are now being targeted for what we call development aggression, which refers to projects that do not really benefit the people, but instead plunder the natural resources of the indigenous communities. So I am referring here to mining operations like gold, copper, nickel. There are ongoing operations now in different regions by large mining corporations. And aside from that, there are also many more 400 plus approved mining applications because the government is encouraging more foreign companies to come in to do mining operations in our country. And majority, or about 70% of all of these applications are found in indigenous peoples' territories. Aside from that, there are also dams, mega dams that are being planned in our communities. And of course, the rivers are very important as well to indigenous people's livelihoods, and they will also submerge much of our land. And then also expansion of monocrop plantations. And because of this, indigenous peoples are struggling to defend our land, territories, and resources from plunder and from encroachment by these corporations that are coming in. And this has resulted to conflict, which has also resulted to human rights violations against our people. And not just the communities, but also indigenous people's human rights defenders are being targeted. They are being killed. The people and advocates are being killed. There are many cases of extrajudicial killings, like since 2016, 39 indigenous peoples have been killed. And they are also victims of illegal arrest, 98, and then 100 trumped-up criminal charges. Activists are being charged with false charges of criminal cases like murder, homicide, and while others have been included in this latest list of so-called terrorists because the government has filed a case to declare these organizations as terrorists, including 600 people, which also includes many indigenous people's activists. And so this is the very grave situation we face in the Philippines today, and the criminalization and human rights violations against indigenous peoples is very much rooted in the struggles to defend our land, lives, and resources against plunder by corporations.
Yes, it's actually quite surprising that the situation is so deplorable in Philippines, in spite of the fact actually that you have one of the most progressive law in the Philippines. Why do you think that this law has not made much progress in its implementation? Do you think that's one of the main reasons why so much of violation against indigenous peoples continues in terms of human rights?
Yeah, that is right. I think there is the existing Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act in the Philippines, which is actually the first law that really is supposed to recognize the rights of indigenous peoples around the world. and this was enacted in 1997. And also the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines has provisions recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples. However, when it comes to implementation of this law and the constitutional provisions, there have been many problems experienced by communities. For example, granting of titles to ancestral domains has not gone that well. Actually, it has also been used to even deprive the indigenous peoples of their lands, because this is being manipulated and used by other interests to take over the lands of the people. And also, provisions for free, prior, and informed consent are violated when projects are coming into our communities. So, yeah, there is a problem on the implementation of this law, and it has not, until today, it has not really served to respect or protect the rights of the indigenous peoples in our country.
Yeah, thank you. Let me go to the next panel for now. Our next panel is Shinako Oyakawa. She is from the Ryukyu, Japan. Shinakawa, I would like to ask you to give a brief background about your people and the issues that you're facing in your territory.
Hi. Oyakawa Shinako Diabing. Thank you very much, everyone, to be here today. I am Ryukyuan, and then I'm going to talk about the brief history of the Ryukyu. The kingdom of the Ryukyu, the independent nation of Okinawa, was established in 1429, where even before Christopher Columbus so-called discovered America. Okinawa became a prefecture of Japan. It was invaded by Satsuma Japan, and then it became the Okinawa prefecture in 1879. And during the Pacific War, the people of Okinawa suffered. That was the only battleground in Japanese territory. And then since then, the Okinawa are facing the U.S. military bases issue. And let me share some information about it. Okay, because of Japan's annexation and colonization, we Ryukyu people have become stateless minority and have been subjected to discrimination and subordination. Although the Ryukyu Islands account for only 0.6 of so-called Japanese territory, but we unwillingly host more than 70% of the U.S. military bases in Japan. And moreover, both Japanese and U.S. governments are violently pushing through construction of new military bases at Henoko and Takae in the northern part of Okinawa Island in Ryukyu. And then the situation now is like we're not recognized as indigenous people, even though the UN encouraged and warned the Japanese government to recognize us as indigenous people and protect our rights. But the Japanese government say, no, there's no indigenous people such as Ryukyu people. So there is no discrimination toward Ryukyu people.
Yes, so the Ainu people are recognized already formally by the government of Japan as indigenous peoples, but that same recognition is denied to the Ryukyu people. And then you say that 70% of the military bases of the U.S. is built in your island, in your territory. Could you share a little bit in terms of some of the specific impact of that militarization and building of the military bases in your island in terms of human rights or other kinds of impact that you're facing?
Okay, the historically U.S. military bases are created during the war and then after the war, so that like my grandfather's own property was taken over during they were captured as a war prisoner at the time, so that without the people's will. Against the people's will, it was taken over, and then it was used over 73 years already. And I distribute some of the picture today. And then, so this is Okinawa Island, and 20% of our island is occupied by the U.S. military bases. And then a lot of rape cases, murder, aircraft was crashed into the universities and so on, so many incidents. But since the majority of the U.S. bases in Japan are in Okinawa, so it's not really the national issue. It's concentrated in Okinawa, and then so that Japanese people not really faced to the discrimination and then the situation of Okinawa.
So, okay, a lot of property destruction and grab by the government to build up military bases in the territory of the Ryukyus. Now I come to Galus. Galus is from Malaysia, particularly from the Sabah region, and he has been working a lot on the issue of land rights of indigenous peoples there. But also, they have been working a lot on the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And the Malaysian government is the party that adopted the UN Declaration. So, Galus, could you start with a little bit of your understanding of how the government of Malaysia has taken forward the UN RIP and the work that you are doing for its implementation?
Okay, thank you. Kopi Besian, Kopi Sanangan. Selamat pagi, good morning to everyone. Yeah, as you said, our government endorsed the UN RIP and the UN outcome document for the WCIP. But despite they endorse it, our IP's rights in Malaysia continue violated. Yeah. I wish to highlight in general among the issue faced by our IPs in Malaysia. For the orang asli in Peninsula Malaysia, their native customary land continue to be unrecognized in the national land code. Yeah. This right exists in common law through judicial precedent only and remain vulnerable to legislative change. Yeah, that's what happened to IPs in Peninsula. For the native in Sarawak and other region, the state government refused to amend state law to recognize the indigenous territory concept known as Pemakai Menua and Pulau Galau. Yeah, this is despite this concept being practiced by the native of Sarawak since time immemorial. And for our community, IPs in my place in Sabah, our community are facing a new form of land grabbing. It's under the disguise of the state plan communal title scheme. Yeah, this is our new, a very new issue now. It's implemented by the state government without transparency and have caused destruction of the indigenous territory by the joint venture scheme attached as a condition to the state plan communal title. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Could you share a little bit of the work that you are doing in Sabah in specific? Because I think there has been a process of land title claims, including the native court, no? So could you share a little bit on that and the challenges you face in that?
Yeah, sure. We must understand that in Malaysia we have 3 regions and we have 3 sets of different land law. Yeah, especially in Sabah, in my place, and Sarawak, our IP's rights are recognized in the law. Yeah, but what happened is the big problem is the implementation of the law. So what we doing, in my experience, the first thing is the awareness, the community knowledge about their rights to the land. According to the law. Yeah. When we do the work with the community, none of our IPs know that they have a rights according to the law. despite this already in our law since British time. So this is very important. The community must aware their rights. Then once they are aware, then they can fight. Yeah. Then the other things is most of the evidence are in oral, so it's very challenging for us to do the documentation of the evidence of the community. Yeah, yeah, and also we now use this international instrument to lobby our government. Yet we want this international document to localize. Yeah, yeah.
So you're working on localization of these international documents to be used by the communities to claim their rights over the lands, no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. One of the key message that indigenous peoples has been sending out in the 17th session is that the land, territory, and resources, the rights of the communities, indigenous communities to this land, territory, and resources, is core to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So I would like to ask Jill, why is this that indigenous peoples are mainly asserting in the 17th session that our right to land, territory, and resources is core to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, I think that many of the 17 goals for sustainable development, when states try to achieve these goals, indigenous people's rights are not fully respected and recognized and protected. Just maybe to state an example on the goal 7 for clean energy for all. For indigenous peoples, we have nothing against clean energy. However, when states try to raise their profile in their energy profile for renewable energy, they implement mega dams, they implement geothermal plants, which are also located in our territories and cause much destruction in our ancestral domains. For example, in the Philippines, there are several dams, 12 dams, that are being targeted to be constructed in indigenous people's communities as part of the government's effort to achieve renewable energy. However, in the process, the rights of the indigenous communities are being violated. And so when we talk about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, what indigenous peoples want is for our rights to be recognized and protected when projects and programs are implemented in our territories, and also for indigenous peoples to be part of the decision-making process, to be consulted, and for them to give their consent if any projects are implemented in our territories, to be sure that these do not violate our rights, do not displace us from our lands, and are truly sustainable development programs.
So what you're saying that we are not actually anti-development as being branded by the governments, but we are against this kind of development that does not take our consent, that does not involve the communities and the people, and that causes displacement and violates human rights. That's what I understood from your presentation.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So we are not enemies of development.
Yes, but the problem is that a lot of these developments, whether it's clean energy, which is really talking about large dams and so on, often infringes upon our rights. Now, okay, then there is a point that I would like to just raise it again with Jill very briefly, because we are almost running out of time. I would just like to ask you something about this, something specific on whatever that is happening now in terms of our violations of rights and the development that is being planned as part of the SDG, whether it's the clean energy, the thermal energy, or infrastructure development is one of the main issues, for example, in Nepal. No? What kind of impact is it having on the daily life of ordinary citizens of the communities, say, for instance, women? Is it perpetuating gender-based violence? Is it also leading to more food insecurity? What kind of impact it's having on ordinary citizens? And I would like all of you to give something on it. Yeah. Starting with Joe.
Yeah. The displacement of communities from ancestral lands has very grave impacts on our people. It causes loss of our traditional livelihoods. So people are displaced from livelihoods, and some have to move to the urban centers where they are very much more vulnerable to violence and to abuse. For indigenous women particularly, they have played very important roles in nurturing the welfare of the family and also transmitting indigenous knowledge to the youth. And this important role is undermined because of these projects that disrupt our daily lives and also cause misery actually for the people who are displaced. And so not just women, but also the children and the community as a whole. And so, there is violence, there's displacement, loss of the important role in the community, and many others maybe they can add also.
Yes, briefly, this militarization, how it's impacting on ordinary citizens.
So that we indigenous Ryukyu people are against the land grabbing, so we say please land back. And then the Japanese and U.S. government say, okay, so we return one of the base back to Okinawa, so that let's get another one. Let's make another one within Okinawa. So it's not the solution, and then it's against our will, because many elections say no to the Henoko new base construction. Our governor today said no, obviously no to the Henoko Bay. It's only like a 30 minutes drive, that relocation plan is only 30 minutes away, and it's not it's never barred like a decrease our burden. And then one of the example after the U.S. bases return to Okinawa, sometimes employee is 100 times more, and then we have more incomes after returning the bases, so that our indigenous voices is included, how we use the lands. And then it's also related to the secure of the women and children, because this a lot of sexual crime, assault is happening in Okinawa. So so it's really important to be heard. Our voice, our indigenous voice is heard to how we use the land, our own land.
Yes, Galus, maybe you also have some points to share.
Yeah, I only want to say that this land, territory, and resources is our IP's livelihood. Without land, we no livelihood. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I think one of the key messages that is coming out from here is that if communities are involved, if the free, prior, informed consent of the people on the ground who are directly affected by this kind of intervention from the government is respected, then there would be a difference in terms of how these developments and other conservation initiatives or infrastructure development that's happening could bring about some major changes. So here I would like to thank the panels. It very much shows that in Asia, there is a shrinking of democratic space, and we are all democratically challenged. And therefore, if our rights are to be achieved, and even if the Sustainable Development Goals are to be achieved of its particular vision of leaving no one behind, then we must address this issue of shrinking of democratic space, because without this, it is the ordinary citizens that are suffering. The human rights defenders are facing the brunt of states' authoritarianism in Asia. So we hope that through this kind of international gathering and raising of voices, we hopefully would be able to address some of these core challenges that we face today. So I would like to thank every one of you for participating in this discussion. Thank you.